I thought I'd very aptly put a Dalek on the back here because we're talking about Dalek.
It's not like you ever have a Dalek at the back of you anyway.
Right. As they used to say in my French lessons, silence la classe. Hello and welcome to Talkin About. We are back with our season series. We're going to call it series 1. Reappraisal. Yeah. Don't forget, and I know there are still people out there. There are still people out there that don't subscribe, they don't like. It destroys the world. It destroys the world in which we live. So like us, subscribe to us, share this. Share it on the dark web. I'm Paul or P-Bal, and I am joined by two lovely ladies.
Where are they then? Oh, hello. It's James.
And hello, it's Jason.
It is a treat to see you both. And
that's not what you said a few minutes ago.
I don't know at what point during the last half an hour of you trying to find your TV remote that could have been. We have got scores previously to this story. Yes, we have. Currently, rock bottom, sad times here on 18.5 is End of the World. It is the end of the world, the end of the world. Third place is Aliens of London World War III on 19.5. Second place is Doctor Who and the Rose on 20. And our current leader, they're trying to think which stories we've done now. Current leader on 22 points is The Unquiet Dead. All that could change. All that could change. Because today we are looking at Doctor Who and the Dalek. Singular. Not the Daleks. It's not a film. It's not a film. It's not a 7-part story. It's one episode. And do you know what I'm going to say here before anyone does an introduction to this? Although Jason has obviously watched the 2 VHSs in preparation.
I just realised.
Do you know what the crushing thing about this story is, folks? Is that when it went out, when it was broadcast, it was a future story, and now it's a historical. Yeah. I mean, it was set in the distant future when it went out. Now, it's gone.
Isn't it?
Yeah. I remember 2012-ish. Was that the Olympics? Was that Spice Girls on a taxi?
It was the Olympics.
Gosh, Emma didn't need a sick note for the taxi because the stadium was full. Does anyone have an introduction for this story?
Well, yeah, I will start us off because Jason's just checking his notes. So we're off to a bunker in Utah as the Doctor and Rose discover not a doctor in distress, a Dalek in distress, as they arrive in a sort of alien museum, if you like, courtesy of multi-billionaire Van Staten, who has been collecting alien artifacts and using them for his own advantage. We are introduced also to we'll come on to whether it's a companion or not a companion, but he is a recurring character of Adam. So yeah, we're set for a showdown between the last 2 survivors, as far as we're aware, of the Time War. And we've talked in our previous stories about how all the way along there's been sort of like little breadcrumbs of, this is what's happened to the Doctor in the meantime, that we haven't seen him. And there's been flashes of some of the damage that's done to him. And here we have it completely laid bare, the impact of the Time War. And we'll talk about that as we go through, because his reaction to the Dalek is quite something. There we go. That's my intro.
Before we progress any further, do you want to apologise to the nation that you're not dressed as a Dalek mutant today?
I'm wearing my Dalek t-shirt today.
Oh, we didn't see it. I was laughing.
Like this, you see? Okay.
Oh.
I'm dressed in my Dalek t-shirt.
I mean,
Rather-
put in the comments below if you'd like to see him up his cosplay game here, because
If you let the slide down, I have to say, I thought he'd come as Henry Van Staten to start with.
Did you?
Yes.
Well, I was going to come as Simmons with with the thing on his face, and I just thought that you wouldn't be able to hear me.
Who's going to say it first, P-Bal?
I'm saying nothing about you having anything like that in stock to wear. I say nothing. Nothing.
So yes.
So yes, I mean, the big thing about this story, I think, I'm going out on a limb because I don't, I've listened to a good half a dozen Big Finishes since they started. Jubilee's not one of them, but I understand from people that it was a well-regarded one, and it is quite a strong basis for this. Have either of you gentlemen listened to Doctor Who and the Jubilee from Big Finish or not?
I'm going to admit to not having listened to Jubilee, and I feel I should have done that in preparation for this recording.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to admit that I haven't either, and the worst thing is I actually have Jubilee, but I haven't actually listened to it. But yeah, it's broadly adapted from that story.
Well, we've heard the discussion quite strongly there, didn't we?
Yeah, this is going well.
I'm sure somebody at home will have listened to it. I've listened to Whatever Happened to Susan Foreman about half a dozen times. So if we were discussing that, I'd be home and dry. But Jubilee, I haven't listened to it. I hadn't. It's interesting because I suppose in some ways I don't have and I love everyone, I love everything. When someone watches a film and it's an adaptation of a book, and they go, yeah, I read the book, but the book was much, but the film's rubbish. And you always hear, well, I like the film. I haven't read the book, I like the film. I think is there a little bit, if you watch Dalek, well, I listened to the audio as well. It's much better than that. It's much better. Do you know what? If you don't listen to the audio, you don't have to have that problem. Don't do anything other than watch television. That is what I'm telling you. Don't read books. Don't invest in any popular culture. Just watch the TV adaptation. Gets you there quicker. You don't have to move. You don't have to read. Unless it's a book from Phantom Publishing, in which case you should buy it.
You should,
even if you don't. Even if you don't read it, just buy it so that we don't end up homeless.
Hundreds of them on the back here. Hundreds of them.
I don't want to question whether you bought those, Jason Clifford.
I may not have actually purchased them, no.
There's a couple there with display only stickers on the front.
There's one that's still got the security bomb tags there on HMV where they're sort of flashing. Let's get this on course, because at the time I remember there was a lot of stuff in the papers about they couldn't get the Daleks and Terry. Could you imagine the Terry Nation estate holding out for more money or wanting some kind of bigger cash cut on these things? But I understand that there was a lot of, and I think it came quite close to the wire, because is that not the Metaltron reference when he says, I called it Metaltron? Is that not what they were sort of thinking they might have to do?
Yeah, they were going to be like the Toclophane later on that Russell T Davies used to say there was two versions of the script. One which had the Dalek in, but the other one, which was supposed to be advanced humans or something, there was supposed to be a Dalek-esque threat, which if they couldn't get the rights to the Dalek, they were going to exchange. It would be the same sort of story, but they would be replacing it with these advanced humans, which the story for that and the sort of idea behind the advanced humans, they then later used in Sound of Drums. So yeah, it was quite late decision as well, I think.
But thankfully, the right decision, because I think that the series is back. The series is starting to establish itself, and there are some references that have been brought, obviously, from the classic into the new. And frankly, I think if we'd not had Daleks, I think that really would have been quite a loss for me. And I really like the way that what they've done here. I mean, this is a strong story, and I think Rob Sherman's script here whatever it might be based on. For a standalone piece of 45-minute television, I think this is a step up the gears from where we've been in perhaps a couple of the earlier stories this season. But without Daleks, I think it would have been a mistake, and I'm glad that they were able to get that negotiation finished. I'm not surprised the Hancock estate have really not been generous in the past with some of the usage of the Daleks. And actually, I adore this Dalek redesign. It was a bold step. It wasn't too ambitious. And it updated it, I think, in the right way. And presenting a lone Dalek without it being an army of Daleks, I think, just gives the Dalek that sort of center stage in this production, allows us to re-explore for a new audience as well as reintroduce for an old audience.
It's like a sort of fifth introduction episode, isn't it?
I was waiting for that.
I avoided the numbers, though. It isn't an intro. We're into it now. We're not introducing anymore. We're in. We're kicked in.
We've introduced the Dalek. We've introduced the concept of the Time Lords being destroyed. We've introduced the Time War. All of this stuff is all full throttle here.
But this is great. This is great setup, though. You've got to have setup in everything, haven't you? To be honest with you, and it's interesting actually, because if you think about think about any television, you've got to have some setup in it, haven't you, before you get into the meat of it.
You do, and you get to see a cyberhead as well. So you get sort of.
Oh, it's not. Don't get me started, because it's not the right era. That cyberhead would not be anywhere near there.
Why wouldn't it be anywhere near that?
Because that's not an invasion cyberhead.
But this is in 2012, so there could have been other cyber incursions by that point.
They would have had the Mond, they'd have had the cloth faces by then, wouldn't they? They'd have had the 80s Cybermen. They'd have had a whole load of different Cybermen by then, wouldn't they?
But that Cyberman head, if I'm correct, was only in Revenge of the Cybermen.
But does that not mean they couldn't have had any other adventures outside of that in their little cyber way? They had a whole cyber war, didn't they?
Mm-hmm.
The Gold War and all that stuff.
See,
Jason Clifford.
I'm thinking too small and narrow here. Too small and narrow.
I mean, it doesn't look like the design they have the year after, because they haven't designed them yet.
Yeah.
I like how you get a Slovene, though, don't you? Because that's in stock. Have a Slovene on, because Rose will recognise that, and it's in stock. That's quite handy. I like it's a little Revenge on with his little head gun. Tankerous old bat.
You get that wonderful little bit of musical score as well when he looks at it, and you just get the tiniest hint of the old sort of Cybermen sort of theme. It's really, really quite a sweet little thing.
But did you actually know in the first round, because they weren't sure they were going to get the Daleks, they weren't sure if they could have a cyber head, so it was actually a Quark head that they had in the box.
No. I'm surprised. That'll be one of the stats, I think, that James has probably got ready for us. One of his gems of gold there.
There was a myth that in one of the shots there was a mechanoid in the sort of when they did the big shot.
Where was that myth, James? Which forum, please? Where?
No, I said it was a myth. It's not true, but that was.
I know myths aren't true, but where was this?
I don't know. I just read it was a myth.
Jason's infected you with, I just said it, I don't know what I'm saying.
We can't both use the same excuse to get ourselves out of an issue. We've got to be consistent, James.
I don't know. I just said it. It came to me in a dream. Oh gosh. Can I just apologise to anyone at home that wanted some kind of discussion of the Dalek episode? Because I don't know if you're getting it. I don't know if you're getting it here.
I think to try and drag us back on track. I think what Jason said is absolutely true, because what about there being a lone Dalek, and I've said this before on other reviews. I always find the Daleks much more sinister when there's less of them, and you have one Dalek here who starts. At the beginning, it's been tortured. It's pretty much dilapidated. It's got no weapons. And very quickly, you know, after Rose touches it, it re-energizes, it gets its weapons, it downloads the whole of the internet, and just slaughters everybody in its way. And I find this, you know, this is one of those episodes where you really see how dangerous Daleks are. And there's something much more dangerous for me of one Dalek on its own than 30,000 Daleks flying through the streets of London, which, you know, we will see at some future date, I've no doubt. But there is something really quite sinister. And I think as a child, having, you know, if you were watching Doctor Who, this was your first, you know, we were talking about how this was really encouraging people to jump on board because there's not too much mythology and things like that. You're suddenly confronted by this killing machine that seems to be unstoppable. And I mean, they do the whole thing of, you know, oh, it can't run upstairs, and then it goes elevate and it goes up the stairs, you know, all of these things. And again, at the time it was billed as, you know, the Daleks are now unstoppable, they can go upstairs. Spoiler alert, they could do that already. But, you know, there was a big thing at the time about how this was a new Dalek. It was, you know, more powerful, more vicious, more deadly than, you know, the previous classic versions of the Dalek. And I just think it's a really good, strong reintroduction of that menace, you know, in such a good way.
And also very cunning, because it's clearly, whilst being tortured and it's been locked away in the vault at the bottom of Van Statten's massive museum, if you like. It's been tortured, but it's biding its time. That's really all it's doing. It's waiting for its chance, and obviously that chance is brought about by Rose touching the Dalek casing, and for some then unknown reason it re-energizes itself, and you know, as soon as it's then got power and it can get to what it needs to, you know, obviously it's then almost regenerated into a brand new Dalek casing, and off it goes. There is a cunning, and I think the way that the Daleks are then depicted going forward in the new series is that they go through a number of different stages of menacing, actually, as we go through, and we won't spoil anything in the future. But I think this one certainly, in just the way that it's executed, you know, it comes around the corner and you just know it's going to exterminate everybody. But it's just the way it's done, and I think the filming of this one's is done in a really good way. It's so simple in its approach. You've literally got the sort of base Under Siege type story that's developed, and you know, this one Dalek is, you know, it's just wheeling around, just doing its thing. And then they add the twist to it that because the way Rose has touched it, it then has taken on some of her DNA, and it, in some respects, infects the Dalek. So that's kind of the twist as you head towards the end of this one. But most certainly, this is Daleks at their most cunning, and a great, as you said, I've said it and you've said it, James, a great reintroduction.
Just think, if only they'd done a story before where the Daleks have got like a human factor in it and it altered how they behaved. Only.
James won't have watched it though, because it's mostly telestats. Oh no, it's not. It's an animation, isn't it?
Hang on. James, who likes less Daleks, has gave 10 out of 10 to the Daleks Master Plan, which is an invasion fleet for the whole galaxy. We won't question any of it. The Daleks are more conversation, aren't they? I think because if you look back at sort of the most recent ones to this, which is the Remembrance, Revelation, Resurrection, they've become very functional. Just, you know, they're we're going to destroy you, attack. They weren't. This one's a lot more conversational, isn't he? He's got a bit to say for himself, and you sort of see that that's a development, how it's going. I think you have to. Especially as you can't go down the route of them being robots. And I think that's the sort of failing of, that's Terry Nation's fault, isn't it, in Destiny of the Daleks, when he's like, oh, they're robots. And even though he established that they weren't robots, you know, there's that notion that become into that. And I think the notion that they're little creatures inside and they might have a bit of a sort of, they've got conditioning, but they've also got their own sort of personality in some way. I suppose it's quite a big thing going forward with this.
And they've not. I mean, this is the first Dalek story without Davros since 1974, and I think that Jason's racking his brains now. Yeah, and I think again it benefits because you know, we will come on to that later on, but we're stripping away layers in the same way that we were reintroduced to the Doctor, and we don't know much about him. It's the same with the Dalek. We know that there's been this time war between the Doctor's people and the Daleks, but we don't know anything about the Dalek mythology, you know, developments, the Davros and I think Davros gets a name check, but not as Davros. Just says, "Oh, your creator would be pleased with what you've just said," or something like that. It's again, it's simplifying it back to its most sort of what's the word I'm looking for? Is the purest form. The Dalek is this killing machine, and that's all you need to know at this point about the Daleks, is that they want to exterminate everyone else. I think the scene that really sort of scared me in a way was when the Dalek shot the water system, made the sprinkler system go. So everyone was sort of firing at it. It just, one laser blast to the sprinkler and then one further blast to electrify everybody that was wet. You know, it's just little things like that. You're just like, it just calculated, what's the quickest and easiest way? I could just kill everybody in this room. I know, I'll get them wet first, then I'll electrify them. Ruthless, absolutely ruthless. But there you go. You know, that's what the Dalek is.
I think the handy thing as well with bringing, because this is absolutely the right point to bring them in. I think it also helped because the ratings were sort of, and then I think this gave it that extra sort of kick to say, you know, there's more from this. Is actually, it works on two levels here in that, you know, I'm not going to go full stereotype, but in the sort of traditional kind of like, you know, mum and dad will know what a Dalek is and they will have an idea of what a Dalek is if they've seen it or not seen it. So they'll be like, Daleks are in this one, you should watch this one, kids. The Daleks are, you know, I watch. And then the kid doesn't know what a Dalek is, but then actually, instead of it being something that looks a bit hokey and it's a bit rattly, it's been souped up. I mean, I'm taking nothing away from Remembrance or anything like that, but there are scenes in Remembrance, God bless it, where they're a bit bobbly on the streets, aren't they? So they aren't entirely solid metal killing machines. And so I think you have the nostalgia element for the older, like mum, dad, grand, or whatever this is, and kids can then go, that's quite shit hot. That's kind of that is scary. That is, you know, and it's souped up enough to be interesting. And also, it's instantly the same way as it was in the 60s. It's instantly a toy that you would want. You can have you want the remote, because that Christmas it was the thing, wasn't the remote control Dalek, wasn't it? Was the thing. Jason's pointing at his TIE fighter. I don't think he knows what a Dalek is.
No, I was pointing at that very toy that you talk about there, which was the remote control one that you whizzed around the room.
Mm-hmm.
You still got the controller?
Yes.
Well,
just not
otherwise, looking so scathing about that. Last week we had the box for his Tom Baker TARDIS and no TARDIS. He's like, well, I've lost the TARDIS. I don't hold on to these things.
No, the TARDIS was inside the box.
Of course I've got the controller. I don't let go of these things.
The TARDIS was actually in the box. So, and that is exactly it. And you're right about it. It launched the Daleks again, though, this, didn't it? Because you all of a sudden had a new wave of Dalek mania amongst a new age group of fans.
Yes.
It's fun.
Did I change the subject really well then?
It's funny at the time because I think a lot of people were a little bit skeptical about it was the eyes more than anything, wasn't it? Because it looks, to all intents, a little bit more like a Cushing Dalek than a TV Dalek. Do you know, that was the boldest change, I think, in some ways, is that it went from little eyes to big eyes.
I think I think the eyes look fine. There's a lot of seeing it from the Daleks' perspective as well, isn't there? Which we get quite a lot of going forward as well.
The plot question I have is why Van Statten doesn't know what Dalek is if they've been in Manhattan, etc., and all that sort of stuff. But hey,
yeah, in fact, there's quite a number of plot holes when it comes to Van Statten and what he would and wouldn't have in that museum of his. It's fair to say. Because
surely then Day of the Daleks must be set. Even if it were in the 80s, they would have been. Oh, anyway,
it supposedly landed on Earth 50 years beforehand, hadn't it? It had fallen to Earth 50 years ago and had been sold in auction.
But like a Doctor Who print. But even so, there would have still been Daleks. Remembrance, you'd have had the 60s Daleks, wouldn't you?
And if you think back to Rose, where it's established that actually there is an underground network that's aware of this sort of shadowy figure of the Doctor, you would think that Van Statten would have some knowledge, given his vast collection of alien memorabilia there, that he would have some sort of understanding or some already some knowledge of the Doctor then, if you like. Given that it appears to be quite freely available on the internet in that time.
And he owns the internet. He says he does.
He does own the internet, apparently.
Which also then, I suppose, there is that line when it's the pre-cred, isn't it, where the alarm goes off and she says, "Oh, if this is a museum, then you must be the alien museum. Then you must be the #1 target." So I suppose in some ways it would make more sense if when he was in the office, he'd be like, "I know you're an alien and blah blah blah. I'd like to do Doctor in the Space Museum and put you in a cabinet." Probably a bit quicker than the Space Museum. I don't know. I do love all of the guest cast in this. I think it's a really strong showing, and it's that great thing because it's the Americans in London thing. So they're all folk what is come from America and have set their careers over here. So that's quite it's a right community of it. But I think it's a great set of parts. And again, we've said in previous episodes, I think every single person that comes into it has got little individual character bits that are, who someone is in it. Nigel Whitney's character's a sadistic. I'm not going to swear, but he's a sadistic so-and-so, isn't he? He is in torturing. So you have the moral questioning of who's the worst here. I mean, obviously the Dalek breaks free and shows who's boss there, but I mean, there is a question that if that's, he doesn't know that the Dalek can do that to him, but he's happy to be quite unpleasant.
And you've got obviously you've got Van Statten, but then you've got, is it Diane, who's the assistant, who in the end does exactly the same as he does. So once he's fallen from grace, she's like, "Oh, take him away and put him, leave him somewhere beginning with S." There's that sort of continuation, if you like, that he's got his comeuppance, and I think that comes up quite well. When the Dalek comes in and sort of says, "Listen to me," because of the torture and everything. And this is where, as you say, the Dalek's been infected, if you like, by Rose, that it's angry at Van Statten but can't actually kill him. He's just wants him to suffer and to see how much he's been hurt. So you get Van Statten gets his comeuppance as well, but not necessarily in the way that you would think. But obviously then he's disposed of by his second in command.
But I don't understand why, though. I understand that there's sort of like this pecking order thing, and he could get rid of his assistants and his sort of entourage. But for her to wield that enough power to get rid of him and send him off into some unknown town beginning with S or whatever it might be, and he'll be a drug dealer and whatever, or a drug addict by nightfall. Where has that power come from, and why is she yielding that?
I think it's come from the fact that he's been responsible for everybody on the base dying. So she orders that the underground place is concreted over and forgotten about. She goes off with whatever power he had before and gets rid of him.
And ultimately gets rid of the museum because apparently it's then filled in with concrete.
Yeah.
I think it's only the concrete thing that gives you the suspicion that she might not be awful. I don't know, because there's, I don't know whether when she says to dump him, is it a smile of he's got his, or is it a smile of I've got mine now? I don't know. Yeah. It's up to the audience, isn't it? It is an interesting thing. There's no guaranteeing there that she's the good guy in this situation. She's seen the opportunity.
She's made her way to the top of the chain, and now she double crosses the boss.
Yeah, essentially. And then we have
gets to be the first person exterminated with the effect, though, doesn't he? In this, we've got the doobie-doo back, haven't we? We've got the X-ray sort of skeleton thing, and so he's the first one to get done that way.
And a little less overacting when exterminated in the new series than there was in some of the classic exterminations.
I think they could have got back some of the extras from Destiny of the Daleks, and recreated. That's one of my favorite exterminations. I think you have the clay pit ones going, but the studio ones even better. Where they're like, "Sorry, I've got my 50 quid to wear this. I think you just had to fall over and die." I'm okay. I think we could have got those back. I'm sure they'd have come to it's Millennium Stadium, isn't it? I think
this was the Principality Stadium. Yes, it was.
It's not quite the sort of resurrection of the Daleks dance before you die kind of thing either. It's kind of like,
the Hugh Walters, as it's commonly known. Jenny Thomason does her little rock, doesn't she? So Revelation's full of balletic Dalek death.
Yeah.
But no, it is. I think kudos, because obviously it's Chris's favourite director, isn't it? It's Joe Ahern, and I think he does it really well. He handles it. I don't know if he's as good a Dalek director as Graham, because I think Graham's had a lot of Dalek. He's had a lot of Dalek experience, so he knows how to get the angles on them. I think that really impose. But I think this is a really well shot one, and it's a sort of high action. And there's lots of sort of pathos moments, and there is the moment where, to all intents and purposes, you do assume that the Dalek's going to do for Rose because she hasn't made it through the bulkhead.
There's that wonderful moment when Christopher Eccleston first comes across the Dalek and it's pitch black, and he's there going, I'm here to help you, and then you get the reveal as the sort of Dalek is. I think for me this is one of my favourite Eccleston acting sort of performances, particularly towards the end when he's like, I'm going to kill the Dalek, and Rose is sort of standing in between the Dalek and him and going, well, what the hell are you doing? And because you really start to see that damage of the Time War, it starts to really come out of him and it's it's so subtly done in the other episodes where he just mentions it very briefly and then he moves on. Whereas here, it consumes him. It becomes quite the sort of dog-eared sort of like, I've got to kill this Dalek. It's the last one. I've got to end the Time War. And in the same way that Rose has infected the Dalek, I think Rose is starting to change the Doctor a bit in the fact that she makes him stop and realise that actually, what kind of person has he become because of the Time War? So I like that, and I like his performance in this.
It's interesting as a moral point. TV's Doctor Who straight away is like, I'm going to exterminate him. That's it. He's like, I'm going to kill you. There's no sort of, we're the last survivors here. We better both just club together and see how it goes. It's like, nah, you've got to go as well now, mate. So it's interesting, and I suppose Rose is continuing her thing of being the human morality. I think it's always been the sort of companions shtick, hasn't it? That they are the viewers, into this. But I think she's increasingly the voice of the morals. And although I suppose, and spoilers for coming ahead, but I mean, it works here in that she knows that this one Dalek is nice. But then when it comes to the end of the series, they're not nice, are they? There's no question of, do you hold back on the morals there?
Mm. That is very true. Don't want to talk too much about it because we're gonna cover it. But there is some parallel themes, I think, when we come to the end.
So we don't cover Doctor Who and the Bad Wolf and the Party in the Ways. What about Adam then? Is Adam a Doctor Who companion? And at the time, I had that pinstripe shirt. I had one from Burton's.
It's an interesting one because he is in more than one episode. So I remember there being a huge debate about what constitutes a companion. And he does get to go into the next episode and we see more of him. I think it's an interesting one because I feel he's there to provide an alternative view to Rose, and you certainly get that in the next episode. I don't know. It's a really odd one, and in this episode, he doesn't really do a great deal. I mean, he runs off, and Rose is trapped with the Dalek. There are a few scenes where he's talking about alien tech, but he doesn't really do a great deal. Next episode is different.
I would class him as a companion only insofar as he travels in the TARDIS, and then therefore there are two adventures that he is involved in. So I think I would be classing it as that. But to me, I just think the character of Adam could literally have been self-contained within this story. I also don't see how he got on board the TARDIS then, if you like, because at one point he has literally left Rose. He's dived underneath the closing bulkhead, and essentially he's escaped. Rose hasn't. That already is showing the kind of character, I suppose, that he's going to become. I don't know that it was necessary at this stage to introduce. We'll obviously talk about further advancement of the character in the next story that we talk about. But for now, I think it could have been self-contained. Adam could have just been in this story, and that would have been enough for me, I think, in this season.
I think when they're running, he's just running, isn't he? He's like, come on, keep running. So I think he runs and rolls under and doesn't necessarily know that she's not straight behind him. I don't think he abandons her in so much as she just doesn't run fast enough, to be brutally frank. Just she'd have got her little aero light trainers on. She'd have been fast away. I think, is it not? Am I misreading? Is it not part of Russell's big master plan that Adam is the companion who couldn't, rather than the companion?
Yes.
So he's just meant to be there to show not every plucky, pretty young Earthling can come and do this because they aren't all geared up. I think it's probably better to talk about Adam maybe
in the
next story is probably a bit more. But it's interesting. I suppose it does also give Rose a sort of slight dynamic. It's funny. It's almost a sort of throwback in some ways to that kind of Pertwee era thing where you'd have someone turn up and they sort of half intimate that Joe might fancy them, but there isn't really any sort of. It doesn't quite go that way. It's a bit of a LATEP situation where it's just like, he's handsome. Do you want a piece? And it's kind of like, oh, no. Okay, there is a sort of almost hint there, isn't there? And then it's ditched quite quickly.
But it does provide that little bit of humor in one of those scenes where he's saying, English, there you go, spoon or cuddle or whatever you English do. It's kind of, there is that kind of a sort of a throwaway to it.
Canoodle, he says, or something like that.
Canoodle, that's the word, yes.
Canoodle. Spoon or canoodle, or he calls him Little Lord Fauntleroy as well. I think it's such an English cliche kind of thing. So, but yeah, I think in this episode there's not much to him. I think the next episode there's more of his characters displayed, and I think then you've got the sort of juxtaposition against Rose more so in the next episode. So
I think it's a can of worms when you used to have to try and define what makes a companion, isn't it? Because traveling in the TARDIS makes Hugo in the Twin Dilemma one, but it would mean that Liz Shaw wasn't one because she doesn't. And it's like, anyway.
I know.
And it's unit date. It's just unit dating all over again, isn't it? This.
So even though Van Statten owns the web, I think he doesn't own all of the web that James goes on, because he probably wouldn't want it. But,
I'll start with Van Statten himself. So originally the character was called Will Fences, which is a reference to Bill Gates. So they changed it because they thought it was too obvious. They changed it to Van Statten. We've talked about the future humans, which would then later be used. This is the only Russell T Davies Dalek story that's not multiple parts. It's not like a two-parter, because all the other ones were through Russell T Davies's time. Bad Wolf was the helicopter in this one, so we got our Bad Wolf reference in. Pretty much everything else we have covered. Jason's just checking the dark web himself in case there's anything I've missed off.
I think you've been very thorough and comprehensive there, James.
Good, thank you very much.
my top hot fact is that Jane Carpenter is married to Julian Simpson, who directed The Almost People and The Rebel Flesh later on for Matt Smith. So,
good piece of
fact for you.
Yes.
And maybe this episode we're on a future Who Talk that's already been recorded. Oh yeah. Exclusive, that is.
All over it.
Ooh.
All over it.
Well, it's not available yet, so it's not click the links below to buy yet.
But good advertising for the future there.
Absolutely. It's future proof now, this is.
Yeah.
So do we have any scores then for Doctor Who and the Dalek singular?
Yeah, go on then, I'll go first. I think this is a great Dalek story. I just remember this really standing out in that first series as the point where I was, I quite enjoyed it up until this point, but this was the point where I really jumped on board, because it was like they've reintroduced the Dalek. It's vicious. It's proper hiding behind the sofa type, behavior, which your parents would talk about, and you'd be like, oh, it's just a Dalek. I saw it wobbling in the 80s, and now it's like slaughtering.
Did you actually hide behind the sofa then, James?
I didn't hide behind the sofa for the Daleks. I did find I think that the scariest Dalek moment was when and we didn't talk about this, but the scariest Dalek moment was when the Dalek would explode and you'd see the Dalek mutant inside. And of course, this is we get to see the Dalek mutant inside when the case opens up. So, there's that sort of moment in this. But yeah, I just think this is such a strong reintroduction to a classic, creature, alien, baddie. And I scored it a very highly esteemed 9.
Ooh. Doesn't like as much as Dalek Master Plan, folks. We lose this and we take photos of it.
It's there. It's a classic 10. You could just imagine, can't you?
You do a reconstruction of Dalek just to see if we can push that extra point out of him.
I think there's a few plot holes in it, but it's a great story.
What Dalek's Master Plan? When they bugger off to Egypt for 2 weeks because they've got the sets. No. Jason, it's just down the road from you, that Van Statten's museum, isn't it?
It absolutely is just down the road, although now filled in with concrete, and I probably couldn't visit it even if I wanted to. I didn't hide behind the sofa either. I wouldn't fit, I'm afraid. It has gone up another notch as we've come into this story, and I'll echo a lot of what James said. The reintroduction of the Daleks in this episode, I think, is a great addition to the series as it's really building, as it's coming through its first year. I think making it a lone Dalek story in this way is probably the best kind of introduction, because you really bring the characteristics and the design of the Dalek to the fore. And I kind of like that. So, we've said it a couple of times already, 30,000 Daleks look spectacular, but it's not as menacing as this single Dalek working its way through the different levels of this museum and just literally exterminating anything and everyone within its sight. And that makes it quite menacing. I remember watching this the first time out and thinking, yes, this really does actually tick a lot of boxes, and I like I like this story in particular, and the reintroduction and the redesign I think worked really well. I think the characters of the Doctor and Rose are really forming well now, and working very, very well together by the time you get to this episode. And the Base Under Siege is always a great plot setup, and there is a lot to like about this one. And I'm going to have to agree with my fellow commentator here, James, and I will also be scoring Dalek a very healthy 9.
Ooh. I don't know why that made me laugh. I literally don't know why that made me laugh.
What, because I scored it a 9? Did that make you laugh?
No. How come it's not 8.5 or 9.5?
Because it's a healthy 9. I was going to score it a 9.
It's a healthy 9. Was yours an unhealthy or a healthy 9, James? You didn't specify.
Mine's definitely a healthy 9.
You're good. You have to check these things. It might not be the right sort of 9.
No, actually, I am still avoiding using certain words at this stage because we're still quite early in the development. There's a number of episodes to come yet. So I'm not necessarily yet bringing out the peak or pinnacle paddle as expected, because I don't know yet that we can actually say that any of these episodes have reached either the peak or the pinnacle that they could.
I'd imagine a 10 would be a peak or a pinnacle.
It would, but we've not scored a 10 yet, so therefore...
I know, I didn't ask you to call it a
there.
blinking pinnacle, did I, either?
Although having said that, didn't I say something was a pinnacle back in one of the classic series, and I scored it an 8.5, so I'm kind of not sure that there's any correlation in the way that I'm scoring these.
We've got a long way to go before Fear Her, so we're not going to reach that.
Jason's officially the Bruno Tognoli of the voting panel, isn't he? Who knows what he's talking about?
Although I have to say, I can sing better than Bruno Tognoli.
Oh, I have heard you do it.
Yeah, but I heard him do it on the Christmas special, and trust me, I'm a lot better.
Yeah, I know. I heard you both. If I'd heard him caterwauling Elton John, then I'd be able to judge fairly, but I haven't.
Coming to a karaoke near you soon, I'm sure.
Gosh. Okay. It's beautiful. Folks, if nothing else, it's worth a ticket to an event alone to see Jason say, I'm not on karaoke, and then first up as soon as there's a microphone and an audience. He's not answering now. He's in a huff.
No, I'm not in a huff. I was just, yes, absolutely. I will always partake if there's a little bit of karaoke on the go. I've also, can I just say, have also witnessed James doing the karaoke as well.
Yes, you have.
Was that one on your weekend things? I don't get invited to these things. Was it one of your weekends?
Oh, no.
I only read about them on social media a week later. What's your karaoke song then, James?
My karaoke song of choice was Gin Soaked Boy by the what are they called? Divine Comedy. Don't worry, no one had heard of it either when I started singing.
No, I think the only one I ever hear is about the woodshed. That's the only one anyone listens to, isn't it?
Something for the weekend, that one.
See? Yeah. And he catawalled that quite recently on television. It's like, people pay for tickets for that. Okay, so my score for Doctor Who and the Dalek, I think actually it's just a great fusion of the director's fantastic in this one, and I think Rob Shearman is obviously a fantastic writer, to be told that, does he? It's a shame he hasn't come back, and I know there are reasons why. So it's a shame that this is his first standalone sort of TV episode. So yeah, I think it's great. It's not the peak and pinnacle. So I awarded Doctor Who and the Dalek singular an 8. It's a fun living 8.
That's a good kind of 8. That's a good kind. I like
that. Is good 8.
It's not healthy, but it's fun living.
It's not clean living, it's fun living, and that's what I like.
It's not healthy. It's not right, but it's okay. That's what Whitney would say, isn't it? Okay, so that brings Doctor Who and the Dalek, triumphant fireworks going off here, in at 26 points, and it is now.
Ooh.
Yeah. This is where the tension ramps up. It is now the season leader. Whoa! Is it going to stay in pole position though? Is it?
Just flicking ahead to see what we got to come.
Oh no, there's a couple of good ones yet.
It is.
Just depends who's got contrary scoring and who hasn't. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining in today.
Thank you. Pleasure as always.
Yes, indeed. I'll echo James's comment. A real pleasure to be here.
I think you're going to sing Divine Comedy for us, then. Change from the blues thing. Anyway, thank you. Honestly, the evils, the death stares you get down the lens here, but you don't see any of that. You just see him looking a little bit defeated. You don't see the death stares.
Who's giving you the death stares now?
And he only half listens to the conversation.
He's not lowered his glasses to give you the evil glare.
Was he the demon headmaster? Anyway, folks, don't forget to like it, subscribe to it, comment below. Have fun, and we'll see you soon.